All right, so the directions for your topographic map project. So in this project, you're going to be combining everything that we've gone over, we've learned about topographic maps, and you're going to create your own. I've set up a checklist as a rubric to create your map so you know exactly what I expect and what you need to do. So use the checklist on the project. It should be in your course under topographic maps, the section labeled topographic maps. Now, for your topographic map, you can use inspiration or ideas from movies, from video games, from your favorite books, or you could just create your own. It doesn't have to be really complicated. You can make it really fancy and detailed if you'd like, but as long as you have these things in your map that I have on the checklist, you're good to go. So I want you to have the following things in your map. I want you to include 5 contour lines starting with 0, because 0 is our sea level, the sea level that we start at. Label each elevation line. I want you to have at least one river. I want you to have a compass rose on your map, a map scale, an X marking the highest point of your map, and the map legend. I'll go through each thing right now. So for your contour lines, I just did an example in paint, just of some lines that could look like just 5 contour lines. Make sure you have at least 5. Remember that these contour lines will never intersect. They'll never cross. Okay. An area with a steeper slope is going to have lines that are closer together. The contour lines are going to be closer together. Gentle slope, the lines are going to be further spaced apart. So for some examples, on like if you're thinking about these landforms and you don't know how to draw them, for instance, here's some I've included on the left. So if I have 2 kind of hills or mountains, the contour lines would look like this on the left. So I've given you some ideas here to go off of. And then I've also included pictures of what a steep slope looks like versus a gentle slope. And they actually give you what it would look like if you're looking at that slope. It looks steep, right? And this is what it would look like if you were to draw the contour lines versus a gentle slope. Gentle slope going down, easy to walk up, right? Would be further spaced apart like this. I will post this PowerPoint by the project so you can reference it as you're making your map. You're going to label each elevation line or each contour line with the elevation that you want. Now, you can make these elevations up. It's just that your contour interval must be the same in between each line. So if you start 0 and you go to 100, the next line has to be 100 away. So your contour interval must be the same in between all lines. You can't have 37 in between this line, 50 in between this line. It has to be the same in between each line. So you have to start at 0, sea level. And I want you to list your contour interval on your map near your map legend and your map scale and your compass rose. It should be all in one section on your map. You can either make it on the bottom left or the bottom right. I don't want it to be taking up a big portion of your map because I want to see it. If you really want to, you can create it on a separate sheet of paper and then kind of include it with your project. And I'll make another video on how to submit your project. But right now we're just going through the project. So if you want to include your map scale, your contour interval, your legend, and your compass rose on a separate sheet of paper that you kind of put next to your map, that's totally fine too. Because I do want you to use as much of the printer paper as possible to draw your map. So you will be using a piece of printer paper to draw your map on. I want you to include at least 1 river on your map, and I've included 2 drawings on how to draw a river. Make sure your contour lines are going to form that V or U shape pointing uphill. So it's going to be pointing uphill. So these lines are pointing uphill, and we have our river or our line going through those curved U shapes. Our rivers or streams are actually flowing in the opposite direction, downhill due to gravity. You're not going to see a river flowing up a mountain, right? Up a hill. You're going to see it flowing down because of gravity. And here, actually, it says out of the mouth. This would be like a mouth of a river out on this area here. It looks like this is like a big body of water in an ocean. Your compass rose, make sure you include a compass by your map scale, legend, and contour interval. And it could look as simple like this. You can make a little more detailed one if you'd like, but I at least want you to have a compass rose on your map. Your map scale. So include your map scale at the bottom of your map by your map legend and contour interval. Labels are important. So if you're using miles, kilometers, what are you using? You got to tell me. For instance, and we talked about this yesterday in class, you could have 2 inches equals 2 miles, but you have to have those labels, inches and miles, otherwise I don't know what it means. Remember that our map scales are relating the distance on our map that we've drawn to the distance in real life. So when you're making your map, make sure you're not having an actual 2-inch island in real life. You want it to be a couple miles big, right? You want a big island. You need space. So make sure you're making your scale appropriate. And if you have any other questions, let me know. Email me if you have questions rather than putting questions in the Dropbox, because I won't get those messages until later. If you want your questions answered quickly, please email me or ask during class. Okay, another point I want you to do is mark an X at the highest point of your map. And I just gave you an idea of what that would look like here. I drew a mountain. It was from my first slide when I showed you contour lines. I marked an X at the top of the mountain because that was my highest elevation point. And remember that our peaks are going to be looking like that closed circle at the top with no other lines in the middle. It's at the peak. Our map legends. So remember that in our map legends, we're including things like landforms, so we can have little hills, valleys, gullies marked on our maps. We can have bodies of waters like our rivers, swamps, our coastal areas. Remember I talked about how a desert kind of looks? That sometimes I'll put just like dots and color it kind of like a brown to look like sand on an area of a map. Vegetation like national parks and farmland are included on that. And then man-made things like buildings or roads. And we did talk about some examples yesterday during our anchor lesson, but I did include some examples on this slide. So you could include a tree as a park. You could have a little campfire as a campground, a big G as a gas station, some railroad tracks as a railroad. Just a line would be a road. Maybe a blue line could be a stream or a river. I also included an example of a map with some symbols on it. It looks like they have a pattern, a green pattern with some trees on it for forest. It looks like they have some like brown areas with like grass patches on it for like a wetland or a marsh. Beach is like a yellow color with like dots on it that kind of looks like sand. Another example we kind of talked about yesterday was using an envelope on a map to signify where a post office is. So make sure you're using things that kind of remind you of that place. Don't use like a cat for a grocery store, because when I look at a cat, I don't think grocery store. So you're going to want to make sure you're using things that kind of remind you of that thing, like a grocery bag or an apple would signify a grocery store. So those are your directions for your map. Remember, if you have any questions, please email me. See you in class.